Howdy, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the Texas SignalCast. I'm your host, Joe Desotel, and I'm here with my co-host, Jessica Montoya Coggins. Hello, Jessica.
Hey, guys.
So we are on the heels of another Trump loss. They're really starting to rack up. I mean, for a guy who's not on the ballot, he sure loses a lot. Um, Talking about, of course, the CD6 race in North Texas, sort of your neck of the woods. I think it runs just under Dallas from Tarrant County. And
Yeah, yeah.
and this is, of course, the seat that was vacated by, was it Ron Wright?
Yes, Ron Wright.
Yeah.
He had lung cancer, and then he also contracted COVID, and so sadly he passed away earlier this year. And there was a special election that was called. Unfortunately, Democrats were shut out of this runoff. So this was a runoff between Ron Wright's widow, Susan Wright, and she had the Trump endorsement, and then there was a state representative who was running, Jake Ellzey.
Mm-hmm.
And Ellzey came out the victor on that. So yes, it was another Trump loss, and he actually, they spent a fair amount of money.
Yeah.
He had done robocalls for her. They were doing a tele town hall the night before the election. His PAC, I think he spent about $100,000 on this, and it was not enough.
Yeah. And Club for Growth, I think, spent well over $1 million alone on her behalf. Of course, she is the widow of the congressman who died. So interesting there. But as you mentioned, Elsie is I guess technically still a state representative, now moving up to Congress, which is interesting because that means there'll now have to be a special election to fill his seat. And I just find it very interesting because on the same day, basically, that Abbott is now figuring out he's got to call this special election to fill the seat of somebody who filled the seat of one of his party members who died of COVID-19, he releases another executive order to ban any local governments from requiring masks or vaccinations or limiting the number of people that could be on premises in a building or a business. So essentially, like every measure that we took during the pandemic, the governor has basically said not going to happen in Texas.
Right. And so this is also very alarming for a lot of folks. Cases are rising, but so are hospitalizations. So we had a few days ago where we logged 10,000 new cases. That's the most since February. Those of us that, remember that, it was very scary. This was, when the vaccines were still not as plentiful. And, many hospitals are, logging in some very scary numbers. And this is, Abbott has, very much taken this is your personal responsibility. We're not going to mandate anything. The CDC has, changed some guidelines for whether or not people should wear masks based on the rate of COVID-19 infection in that area. That is not something Abbott is adhering to. This is very scary also for a lot of parents and teachers. School is starting, at least in the Dallas area, school starting in like 20 days or something. It's right around the corner.
Yeah, and while the vaccination rate continues to go up, we are actually only at 43% in the state of Texas. So we're really at the bottom even of the big states. And we're seeing even Florida, I think, outpace us, even though they're having a surge as well. And the unfortunate thing about Florida is that it's such a tourist heavy state. People are going to go back to wherever they're from and continue to spread this virus all over the country. And so it's, really unfortunate, but in our, we're doing much better in our larger counties. Travis County, where I am, is at 56%. You are right in Dallas County is at 43%. You go just outside of Dallas County, right next door, and it drops to 38%. In Kaufman County, you go one more county over to Van Zant, it's at 27%. Mm-hmm. And really, you look around Dallas, they're all in the 20s. If they're not the big urban county, Tarrant County at 42%. And we've mentioned before that the Valley is actually doing quite well because they experience the early effects of the pandemic, and their rates are really the highest in the state. 58% in Webb County, where Laredo is, um, Starr County 58, and where McAllen is, Hidalgo, is at 53%, and Cameron, where Brownsville is at 55. So but really in the whole rest of Texas, it looks very, we mentioned this before, it looks just like the electoral map. I mean, the counties that voted Biden are basically above 50%. The counties that voted Trump are in the 20s and 30s. And you could see some of the messaging over the last week, folks starting to come around, people on Fox News starting to try to promote the vaccine and starting to call it the Trump vaccine. Doesn't seem to be helping.
Yeah, I mean, it is very heartbreaking. And, a lot of hospitals are really trying to sound the alarm too on this. As you mentioned, Kaufman County, they're one of the counties that is quickly running out of ICU beds.
Mm.
And we're, Texas, we're not, there's some other states that have, really, really dire needs. We mentioned Florida, but Missouri is also one of those. And you're seeing these heartbreaking stories of, people in their 30s, 40s, 50s. They were just adamant against the vaccine. And, they're being placed on ventilators. Many are dying. This is, I think the saddest thing for me is this was all very large. This was all preventable.
Yeah.
Pretty much everyone who is hospitalized, I think it's something like 90, like almost 99%, it's unvaccinated. And so this was
99.5%.
99.5%. And so you would think that, if a governor really wanted to protect the state, they would be doing everything possible to get people vaccinated, making sure that, like, hey, you know what, there really isn't a magnet in here. There's no Bill Gates microchip. There's no,
Yeah.
you might have some side effects. You also might not. That this is, and wouldn't it be nice if a company maybe provided like days off for people to get the vaccine, maybe some bonuses, stuff like that. But Abbott has not encouraged that, and now
it's truly amazing that their own narrative has really come to bite them, because it is their people and their base that's being affected by this more than anyone else. And if their whole narrative about well, we don't want masks and vaccine mandates, and because we want people to just go back to work and get back to work. I mean, we're hearing a lot about service industry people like not taking these jobs because the risk involved, and there are not enough benefits to overcome the risks. And when you see the governor saying basically like you can't require masks, you can't do any of these things, then that's not going to encourage people to go back to work. And so if they really believed in that, wanted that, they change their tune, and I don't really know if we're quite there yet.
And that nobody wants to see this happening. There's this narrative, I think, from a lot of Republicans in the state that Democrats are for lockdowns and for all this stuff, and that is not the case at all. I cannot tell you how much I don't want this to be happening, but this is the reality. This is what they've created.
Yeah.
So this was very much a self-inflicted wound,
Mm-hmm.
and we're all suffering.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the show does go on in some cases. I know that with Blues in the Green actually went ahead on on Tuesday night in Austin, and I saw some of the pictures, and I was like, oof. I mean, it was packed, and they show pictures from the crowd and stuff like that. And so I'm sure we'll continue to see sort of the effects of that. But the Olympics also went on, and in Tokyo, there's a lot of you just see sort of the glitz and the glam of the Olympics, but then behind the scenes, it's really apparently pretty chaotic in Japan right now, because a lot of people are very upset that the games went on anyway, because they're having issues with COVID over there. And so, but one of the ways it sort of has a Texas bent to this is that, of course, Simone Biles, who is known as the GOAT in gymnastics and was the favorite to win, she ended up not performing in some of her team and individual events, and that became immediately political. And so the same folks who were America first started attacking, Team America, like our American team on an international stage, and just immediately politicized it, trying to say she was weak and she let her team down. It seemed to be an immediate echo chamber on the right that they felt that they could do this and treat someone like this.
Yeah, our colleague Kennedy Sessions, she wrote an article, very heartfelt on Texas Signal. I encourage folks to check it out.
Hmm.
Basically, Black women don't owe you anything, and
Hmm.
for Simone, gymnastics, there have been gymnasts that have died from, if you're not 100% in that sport and you're trying to do something, one false move is catastrophic. So the fact that she recognized, look, I cannot do this. I do not want to risk a horrific injury to myself. Plus, she's also a great teammate. She knows that she has teammates with her fellow USA gymnasts that can do this. And there was another gymnast, Simi Lee, who took the gold. And so that proves, and she was there, she was cheering on, and I think it was. And I know that we even had a Texas lawmaker who chimed in on this, and even got a rebuke from.
Yeah, I mean it's just finally some of this stuff, it's almost like they never ever in their life thought they would ever have to experience any type of consequences for the things they say, which is all they try to do to other people and punish them for the decisions they make. In this case, it was the deputy attorney general who made some awful comments, and he has a history of doing this, by the way, and he works under Ken Paxton, but he essentially had to apologize to Simone Biles for the comments that he made, and said that he hopes she gets better, and he showed a lack of judgment. But the fact is, he was just chiming in and as a part of the crowd, and this is what the people on the right were saying, and so he didn't think anything he said was out of line, because this is just what the sort of talking points were. And
I
it's
thought that Texas Republicans were all about, empowering women's sports, but apparently that's not true.
That's a really good point. Yeah. So, that's we'll continue to see that. We know that I mean, there were folks out there, saying that they had never cheered against the USA basketball team, but they were happy to see them lose. I mean, it just goes on and
Yeah, for
on. And
the
this
women's team, I don't know if you saw Briscoe Kane even referred to make. He had a tweet, asking, "Why is this angry purple-haired man on my television?" This is the same lawmaker. He was referring to Megan Rapinoe.
Yeah.
These are the same lawmakers that are trying to ban trans athletes from Texas. Under the guise of, oh, we care so much about women's sports.
Yeah.
Evidently not. Interestingly, the comment that the deputy AG made, basically saying he preferred Carrie Strug to Simone Biles. Carrie Strug obviously came out. Carrie Strug was a gymnast in the
Hmm.
90s. So it's kind of an infamous scene where her ankle was, I think, broken, and she does this thing. Well, she ended up, having to retire after that, and I think she's still dealing with that injury decades later. So she was very supportive of Simone, as have many other gymnasts around the country. So
That's really the most incredible thing, is they love to see people suffer. And so for them, yeah, Carrie Strug's doing that and basically ending her career, they toast to that kind of a thing, and they love to see that kind of a thing. One of the things this guy would apologize said in a previous post was essentially like, 40 years ago, he was talking about World War II, so I guess it would have been longer, 60 or whatever many years ago. It's like, saying that, people fought, ran, jumped, swam into a barrage of gunfire to, liberate a continent, and now the military is, dressing up like, and dancing the Macarena, and just like really really silly stuff, but they're always trying to romanticize this, this idealized version of manliness and masculinity and machoism, and obviously they couldn't do any of this stuff.
no,
Nor
yeah. People have pointed out, like, the people who have been criticizing Simone Biles, like, I'm not even sure you could run 50 feet. Like, don't even.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's just it's absolutely just sexism and racism, and
Mhm.
we see it consistently. It's beginning pretty easy to point out, and as we try to do on this podcast, like make the connection between those types of behaviors and then some of the other things that we're seeing in Texas, including the attack on voting rights and the attack on history that's taught in our schools. And this is all the same playbook, and it's just so that they can take these pot shots at people like Simone Biles and Shakari Richardson and just continue to do it without any accountability. And if nobody knows the history, then there's less chance that they'll be held accountable for, for the mean, hateful things that they say. And that's exactly how they like it. And so, the Dems, of course, who broke quorum, the Texas House Democrats are still in D.C. right now, and as of today, I think there's just now starting to be some reporting about it. There was a hearing in which three of the Texas Democrats were testifying. I think Symphonia Thompson, Nicole Collier, and Diego Bernal had the opportunity to testify in front of Congress about these voting restrictions. And there was also, of course, the minority party, which in Congress is the Republicans. They brought one of their own from Texas, Travis Clarity. Noticeably missing was our friend and parliamentarian guru. I can't remember his name. What's his name? The guy you actually mentioned him. The
Oh,
thing
Briscoe King.
Briscoe Kane, yes, who was the chair of the.
He's never been quite ready for prime time, so that might have been.
I love this too. They're like, dude, you're a backbencher. We gave you, an opportunity and you blew it, and so now you just got to sit and.
For folks that don't know, Briscoe Kane is a state representative, and he's the chair of the elections committee. So I think, yes, the first time he was trying to do a hearing, he screwed something up, and then resulted in
Mhm.
in the hearing having to be rescheduled. He, there's all the stuff about Senate Bill 7. They could not get their story straight on the early poll closing on Sundays. And so, yes, Briscoe Kane has
Yeah.
I guess he got relieved of his duties.
Yeah. I mean, in so many ways, yeah, you going back to that point you just made about how he screwed up the original hearing. I mean, that did delay the bill. I mean, I'm not necessarily sure you can draw a direct line from that screw up to where we are here today, but it's pretty close. It was certainly a milestone in roadblock into them passing this bill. Um, but yeah, it looks like they're going to continue to do this. The Speaker of the House put out a civil arrest warrant for one of the state representatives who did come back, and essentially tried to negotiate. When he felt like those negotiations were going nowhere, then he said, "Okay, well, I guess I'll be headed back to D.C." And I don't even know what a civil arrest is. Is that like a citizen's arrest? Like if you see this guy in the airport, grab him? Like I don't really know what that's supposed to mean. But it's all theater, and so that's really what this is about. I think the dates that people should be looking at right now, of course, are August 7th, which would be the last day, or is it August 6th? But August 6th or 7th, that would be the last day of the session, and then the governor could technically call another one the very next day. And then perhaps it might be on the Democratic senators at that point to break quorum, because it only takes either one, the Democrats in the Senate or Democrats in the House, to break quorum. And that could happen. And because the governor vetoed the entire legislative budget, that deadline, which is technically September 1st, when the new budget calendar starts, they have to essentially have a bill passed through both sides, both chambers, and signed by the governor before September 1st, or staff doesn't get paychecks. In the 5 adjoining agencies do not get paychecks. And so there'll be at a minimum a delay in that.
Yeah, we're coming up on some pretty hard deadlines. I think last week we talked about that redistricting data is
Mhm.
getting ready to come out. So the census did confirm that they would be releasing that in about 2 weeks, And so this is, that sort of jeopardizes even the Republican plans on that.
Hmm.
And that's also a big deadline there.
Yeah.
So this is, for someone who, has tried to position himself as, a superior governor, Abbott is kind of flailing about right now. And
Yeah.
it's in a way that's really, really negatively impacting our state.
Absolutely. They can't get out of their own way. And the interesting thing is, I saw a story this morning that Texas is now dropped out of the top 3 business-friendly states. That has to honestly be the most embarrassing thing for Greg Abbott that's happened in the last year, and that says a whole lot. But he kind of hangs his hat on Texas being business friendly. And if you can't, if without expanding health, the Medicaid, when all those dollars that would be coming in to create a healthier state during the pandemic, and the grid failing, and then him doing nothing about either one of those issues, ultimately will have an impact, as you said. And then that's just the evidence that we are now no longer the business friendliest state in the
And
union.
I mean, just imagine, starting September 1st, we've got the new abortion law that will be on the books. So this is the 6-week abortion ban plus a possible $10,000 bounty if you can prove someone has aided or abetted an abortion. There's the permitless carry. They're still trying to pass a lot of this anti-trans legislation. So this is just like culture war on culture war on culture war. And at the end of the day, you haven't fixed the grid, and we're still in this COVID nightmare. And this is basically Abbott's legacy. This is what he's done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll continue to keep our eye on him. I think we should probably just mention also before we wrap it up that for those who haven't been paying close attention, there was a march Beto led with Reverend Barber, right? He's like a pretty well-known guy. You might have seen him on MSNBC.
He's the leader of the Poor People's Campaign. He was a
Yes.
great champion for not just voting rights, but also minimum
Hmm.
wage and getting
Hmm.
a fair economy for everyone.
Exactly. And so often we mention how these things are so related. And so he and Beto staged basically a 3-day march from Georgetown to the Capitol, at which point our friend and ambassador of the state of Texas and city of Austin, Willie Nelson, will be performing on Saturday. So
Yeah.
I think at the
Do you know,
Capitol.
do you know that actually in England, in London, you can actually go and see a sign from when Texas was still a country that there was an ambassador residence. Have you ever seen that?
Oh, wow. No, that's pretty cool.
I know. Yes. Someone should put like a photo of Willie Nelson above there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm like, we were in a state that long. By the time somebody got to London, we were probably not a
Probably.
country
Yeah.
anymore.
Well, we'll just put it up.
Yeah, but that's pretty cool. I did not know that. Well, okay. As always, thanks everybody for listening in and for supporting Texas Signal. Definitely go check out the stories we've got, and we mentioned a few of them at texassignal.com. If you would like to become a patron and help sustain this progressive journalism, you can go to texassignal.com, and in the top right, join our Patreon, and we certainly would appreciate that. In the meantime, join the conversation on Twitter or Facebook. And till next time,
Yeah.
we'll
Stay safe, guys.
talk to you soon. Yeah. Bye-bye.